My name is William Turner, but everyone in my unit called me Will. I was 23 years old that winter, a private first class in the 101st Airborne Division, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, easy company. Before the war, I'd never been out of Pennsylvania. Home was a row house in Scranton, coal dust on the windowsills, church on Sundays, and my mother complaining that my boots were always muddy. Now I was outside a little Belgian town called Bastogne, in a frozen foxhole cut into hard, unforgiving earth, with German tanks and infantry somewhere out there in the woods trying to crush us. It was December 24th, 1944, Christmas Eve. The Battle of the Bulge was in full swing. The 2 hours I'm going to tell you about began at 0400 and ended at 0600 that morning. They were only 2 hours on my cheap army watch, but they changed everything I understood about fear, duty, and what it means when you say you're fighting for your country. At 03:58 I checked my watch again, even though I already knew the time. It was habit as much as anything. The luminous hands glowed faintly green in the dark. "Quit romancing that watch, Turner," a low voice came from my right. "It ain't going to tell you anything good." That was Private Joe "Red" Matheson from Birmingham, Alabama. He was called Red for his hair and his temper. He sat hunched in the other half of our foxhole, blanket around his shoulders, M1 balanced across his knees. "It's 03:59, I said. "In 1 minute we officially start being miserable for a new hour." Red snorted softly. "Could be worse," he whispered. "We could be back in camp pulling KP. "In a warm kitchen," I said, "with coffee that doesn't freeze in the cup." I shook my head. Terrible. The snow in the boys' Jacques Woods was crusted over with ice, each step earlier in the night having made a crunching sound you could hear for 50 yards. Our breath rose in pale plumes. The trees around us, the tall firs and bare branches, were black silhouettes against a cloudy sky. Somebody down the line coughed, the sound quickly smothered. A little behind us, I heard the faint crackle of our radio set as the operator adjusted something. Farther still, one of the big 155s from our artillery battalion back in Bastogne thumped out a round, the sound dull and distant, somewhere else on the front. The Germans had us surrounded. They had more tanks, more guns, more men. We had our rifles, a scattering of bazookas, and not enough winter clothes. People liked to talk about the battered bastards of Bastogne. At 4 in the morning, it didn't feel like a nickname, it felt like a fact. I rubbed my gloved hands together, trying to get some feeling back into my fingers. "Think they'll hit tonight?" Red asked quietly. "They hit every night," I said. "Question is where." He was silent for a moment. "You ever think about home at times like this?" Red asked. "All the time," I said. "My ma's probably up already, starting on bread for Christmas dinner. My dad's probably complaining that the coal delivery's late. My little brother's probably trying to peek at whatever's under the tree." "You got a tree," Red whispered. "Yeah," I said, "we cut one every year, same hill, same argument about which one, straight enough." He smiled faintly in the dark. "Simple or fight," he murmured, "pickin' trees." "Yeah," I said, "nobody's shooting at you from the branches." At exactly 0400, the sergeant came crawling along the trench. Sergeant Jack O'Malley was 30, from Boston, lean and tough, with a nose that had been broken at least once in some bar fight long before the war. His voice carried even when he whispered. "Turner Matheson," he said, crouching by our hole. "Eyes open, intel says Krauts have been feeling around this part of the line, might try a push before dawn." "Any armor, Sarge?" Red asked. "Probably," O'Malley said. "They've been heard moving in the treeline northeast. We've got a couple bazooka teams ready. You just worry about what's in your lane. They break through here, there in the road to Bastogne." He clapped my shoulder once. "We hold this," he said. "We keep the road, we keep the road, we keep the town, we keep the town. Those folks back home get to say we stopped 'em at Bastogne. You tell that to yourself when you start feeling sorry for your fingers." "Yes, sir," I said. He moved on, checking each foxhole. His breath puffed little ghosts in the cold. Behind us, the radio man muttered something into his set. Private Eddie Mills, 19, from Brooklyn, thin as a rail. His hands were bare as he adjusted the dials, fingers going red in the chill. "Any word, Eddie?" I called softly back. "Same as always," he said, keeping his voice low. "We're surrounded, resupplies tricky, and the Krauts want our heads for Christmas ornaments." Red chuckled under his breath. "What do you want, Turner?" Eddie added. "You expecting Santa on the airwave?" "Only if he's bringing hot chow and air support," I said. Eddie made a face I could just make out. "They did say this, though," he added. "Division thinks the Germans are going to make a serious play at dawn. We're going to be the present they don't get." I swallowed, feeling my throat sticky and dry. The first hour had begun. From 0400 to 0500, time moved strangely, too fast and too slow at the same time. At 0405, the woods were quiet but for the small sounds of men shifting in their holes, weapons being checked one last time, someone muttering a prayer in a foxhole down the line. "Which one is it this time?" Red whispered. "The one about walking through the valley of the shadow." "Yeah," I said, "that one gets a lot of use out here." I'd never been particularly religious back home. Church had been something you did because everybody did it, because your mother stood by the door and gave you that look if you tried to say you were too tired. Out here, in the dark, with death literally in the air, the words sounded different. At 0410 the first sign came. A faint sound, at first just a rumor in the wind, metal clinking, a low rumble, too steady to be thunder, too mechanical to be anything natural. Red stiffened. "You hear that?" he whispered. "Yeah," I said, "tanks." We pressed ourselves a little higher in the foxhole, peering through the low branch screen we'd built in front. Somewhere out beyond the first line of trees, a shape moved against the darker dark, a bulky mass low to the ground with a long snout, then another, and another. Panzer IVs maybe, or Panthers, even their silhouettes looked mean. "Jesus," Red breathed, "they brought the whole parking lot." Behind us someone hissed, "Bazooka teams, get ready." Our bazooka guys, two-man teams with the long, hollow tubes slung over their shoulders, shifted into better positions, using tree trunks for cover. I saw Corporal Jenkins from Ohio haul his tube a little higher, his assistant shoving a rocket into the back end with practiced motions. The tanks didn't come straight at us, they stopped just inside the tree line, hulls partially obscured by branches, their engines idled, a low growl. Then the artillery started. The German barrage came in like a freight train of sound, whistles rising, then falling, then crashing all along our line and just behind it. The first shells hit somewhere to our left, a string of explosions that shook the ground under our boots. "Down," O'Malley shouted, "stay low." We hugged the earth, pulling our helmets down over our ears. Dirt and snow rained down on us. Something whined overhead, a piece of shrapnel probably, and slammed into a tree trunk, splintering wood. The barrage walked closer, feeling for our positions. Boom, boom, boom. A shell landed maybe 20 yards behind our foxhole, the concussion slapping my face even from that distance. I felt something sting my neck, a pebble, a piece of wood. My ears rang, everything muffled. Red's mouth moved next to me, I saw his lips shape, "You okay?" But I didn't hear the words at first. Then sound filtered back in like somebody slowly turning the volume up. "I'm good," I said, though my hands were shaking. Not all the screams were German. Somewhere to our right, a voice yelled for a medic, then another. Then, heartbreakingly, a third one started and cut off mid-word. Doc Hanley, our medic, scrambled past our hole, hunched low, his aid bag bouncing. He disappeared into the shadows, moving toward the cries. "Crazy bastard," Red muttered, "running into that." "He's got his job," I said, "we've got ours." The barrage lasted maybe 10 minutes, it felt like an hour. At 0420 it shifted farther back, hitting the woods behind us, our supply track, anything that might move. The tank's engines revved slightly. "Here they come," O'Malley called softly down the line. "Stay sharp." The infantry moved first, dark shapes between the trees spreading out. Some hunched low, some on their bellies, some using the trunks as cover. I could see the glint of bayonets, the rise and fall of their breath in the cold. "Let them come in," O'Malley said. "Don't shoot at shadows." My finger rested on the trigger. The wood of the rifle stock felt hard and smooth under my palm, familiar and cold. At about 50 yards, I saw a helmet clearly, the silhouette of a man raising a pair of field glasses. I lined up my sights. The world narrowed to that one dark circle on his head. I exhaled, felt my breath fog on the stock, and squeezed. The M1 kicked. The muzzle flash lit the tree in front of us. The man with the binoculars jerked backward and went down. The battle began in earnest. Our line lit up, muzzle flashes stuttering between trees and foxholes. The Germans answered, their own fire stitching through the undergrowth. Bullets snapped overhead, cutting twigs, thudding into trunks, making leaves jump. Red fired at a shadow sliding from one tree to another. The shape collapsed against the trunk and slid down. Another figure dropped to his belly and started crawling forward, only to disappear in a burst of snow and dirt as one of our machine gunners caught him. The tanks stayed back, their guns booming occasionally in support but not moving forward yet. They were cautious. They learned the hard way that we had teeth. At 0430, I heard the distinct hiss and whoosh of a bazooka firing. Jenkins' team had taken a shot. Come on," Red whispered. A second later, one of the tank silhouettes flared orange on its side. Flame licked along the armor. The turret lurched, stopped, then slowly swung to a halt. Cheers rose from a couple of foxholes before someone snarled at them to shut up before they got targeted. The Germans pressed closer, using the dips in the ground, the deadfall, whatever they could find. They were good, not the panicked conscripts you read about, but experienced troops who knew how to move under fire. One of them got within 30 yards of our hole, hurling a grenade that bounced once in the snow and dropped into a shallow hollow just ahead. "Grenade!" Red yelled. We ducked, helmets almost touching our knees. The blast was close, but not close enough to do more than shower us with icy earth. My ears rang again, a high whistle mobbing the sounds of battle. I didn't think about fear anymore. There was no room for it. There were only targets and cover, reloads and checks, the mechanical rhythm of shoot, duck, breathe, think, shoot again. At 0435, a shape lunged at the edge of our foxhole, a dark mass with steel glinting, a German soldier who'd made it close enough to try to jump in with us. Red reacted faster than I did. He whipped his rifle butt around and smashed it into the man's knee, knocking him sideways. As the German sprawled, I brought my rifle up and fired once into his chest at almost point blank. He collapsed in the snow, his rifle skittering away. For a second, his hand twitched toward something, maybe a knife, maybe just reflex, then went still. Red was breathing hard. "Thanks," I gasped. "Just don't let him in my bed, Turner," he muttered. By 0440, the first wave was starting to falter. The bodies in front of our holes made it harder for the next men to move forward. Our machine guns had found their ranges. But the tanks were still there, and they were getting braver. One of them edged forward, its nose pressing through the tree line. Its main gun fired again, the muzzle flash lighting the surrounding trees for a second. The shell hit somewhere behind us, throwing up a column of dirt and broken wood. "Bazooka," O'Malley roared, "get that bastard." Jenkins' team moved, darting to a new position behind a shattered stump. I saw Jenkins plant his feet, shoulder the tube. His assistant slammed another rocket home. "Range 70, Jenkins shouted, more to himself than anyone else. He fired. The rocket streaked out, a line of smoke in the dark. It hit the tank's front plate and bounced, deflecting off at an angle, exploding harmlessly off to one side. "Damn it," Red hissed. The tank turned its turret toward Jenkins' position. "Move," someone screamed. Jenkins and his assistant dove out of the way as the tank's cannon roared. The shell slammed into the stump, obliterating it in a shower of splinters. I saw Jenkins get to his knees, blood on his face but alive. His assistant didn't move. "Turner," O'Malley shouted, sliding into our foxhole for a second, his face flushed with cold and fury. "You see that tank's side?" "Yeah," I said. "When it sticks its nose out, the left side's exposed." "We're gonna need a better angle," he said. "When I say go, you and Red shift 10 yards to that shell hole there." He pointed with his chin at a depression closer to the tree line. "You get low, wait for that tank to come a little further and fire for the side if Jenkins can't get a clear shot. Got it?" "Got it," I said. Red nodded too. This was the part where knowing what needed to be done and wanting to do it parted ways. The space between our foxhole and that shell crater was maybe 10 yards. Under normal circumstances, I could have crossed it in a couple of steps without thinking. Right now, it was 10 yards of open ground watched by men with machine guns and a tank gun that had just turned a tree into toothpicks. My stomach clenched. But there was the tank, and behind it Bastogne, our wounded, our supplies, the line that had to hold, and behind that, home. "On three," O'Malley said. 1, 2, 3. We went. I exploded out of the foxhole, hunched low, legs pumping. Snow crunched under my boots. I felt rather than saw bullets stitch the ground nearby, throwing up little geysers of white. Something tugged at my sleeve, and for a split second I thought I'd been hit, but it was just fabric tearing on a branch. Red was a dark shadow at my side, mouth half open in a shout I couldn't hear. We dove into the shell hole together, slamming into its icy bottom. My breath whooshed out of me. I sucked cold air back in, chest burning. "You alive?" Red gasped. "Yeah," I wheezed. "You?" "Never better," he muttered. We pressed our rifles to the rim and peered over. From here, the angle was different. The tank loomed a little to our right now, its nose further out of the tree line, its side plate partially visible between two trees. "Come on, just a little more," Red whispered. As if it heard him, the tank ground forward another yard, snow and dirt crunching under its treads. "Now," I said. "Red, you mark it. Jenkins might get the hint if he's still with us." Red raised his rifle, switched to single shots, and popped 2 rounds at the side plate, not enough to damage it, but enough to smack off the armor with sparks. Jenkins, bleeding but not beaten, saw the flashes. I watched him drag himself and the bazooka a yard or two to the left, lining up on the same spot. The tank's side was fully exposed now, turret still focused on where Jenkins had been before. "Please don't look over here," Red murmured. Jenkins fired. This time, the rocket hit square on the mid-side of the tank, just above the treads. There was a bright flash, a deeper boom, and then black smoke billowed from the hole it made. The tank shuddered, squealed, and stopped. Its turret started to turn, then froze. The engine whined for a moment longer, then died. A cheer rose again, ragged but real. The other tank engines revved a little, then settled. They didn't push forward immediately. They were cautious again. At 0450, the last of that particular wave of infantry fell back, dragging their wounded. A few lay still, dark shapes against the snow. Our line was ragged but intact. We had some wounded, some dead, but the trees they'd been in front of were still our trees. O'Malley slid down into our shell hole, panting a little. "Nice work," he said shortly. "You two okay?" "We're all here, Sarge," Red said, voice still a little shaky. "Good," O'Malley said. He looked at his watch. "That was just the first game. Dawn in about an hour. They'll want something to show for their trouble before it gets light." He jerked his thumb back toward our original foxhole. "Get back there," he said. "You did your little hero sprint. Now you get to sit and freeze like the rest of us." We scrambled back, this time moving under the cover of the trees and rocks that the first attack had provided, slipping into our dugout again. Doc Hanley appeared, his face pale but stubborn. "Any holes in you I should know about?" he asked. "Just my feelings," Red said. "You got anything for that?" "Not in this war," Doc said. "You'll have to wait for the next one." He moved on, checking the others. At 0455, the sky in the east had begun to change, the blackness lifting to a deep navy. It wasn't dawn yet, but you could feel it thinking about arriving. First hour down, Red said quietly, still breathing. Don't jinx it, I said. He nudged my shoulder with his. If we make it through this, Turner, he said, you're coming down to Alabama, I'll show you what real barbecue tastes like. You make it through, I replied, you're coming to Pennsylvania, I'll show you hills that aren't covered in Germans. He grinned. Deal. The second hour from 0500 to 0600 began with a different kind of silence. The guns had quieted both ours and theirs as if everyone was taking a breath. The snow-covered woods held a kind of gray light now, shadows softening, details sharpening. I could see the bark on the trees, the frost on the edges of my rifle. At 0505, Lieutenant Davis crawled along the trench toward our hole. He was 25 from Minnesota, with a face that would have looked boyish if it hadn't been chiseled by weeks of not enough sleep and too much responsibility. He dropped into our foxhole for a moment, his eyes scanning the treeline automatically even as he talked. We got word from battalion, Davis said. The Krauts hit hard up and down the line, we pushed them back for now but they're regrouping. Intel thinks they'll try a more focused assault just before sunrise, probably with more armor. They know they don't have forever, their fuel situation's bad. Worse than ours, Red muttered. Maybe, Davis said, look, there's something else. He looked at Eddie, our radio man, who had edged closer to hear. Division and Corps artillery are ready to help, Davis said. We finally got some ammo, but they don't have eyes, they're asking for forward observers. We need someone to get up on that little knoll there. He pointed through the trees at a slight rise maybe 50 yards in front of our line and marked German positions when the next wave comes. Call in fire, correct it, keep it off our heads. I followed his finger. The knoll was just high enough to see over a good chunk of the broken ground in front of us, a perfect spot for seeing and being seen. You want to send someone out there? I asked, my voice low. With the next attack coming, Red added. Davis nodded. Somebody's got to do it, he said. Artillery could make the difference between us holding or getting rolled. I'm not going to order a man to go sit out there, I'm asking for volunteers. For a second, no one said anything. It was like the woods themselves had taken that in and were waiting to see what we'd do. I thought of that knoll, 50 yards. Once you were there, there was nowhere else to go. No deeper foxhole, no tree to hide behind, just a bit of ground and whatever you could scratch into it with your entrenching tool. I also thought of what it would mean if we didn't have eyes up there when the next wave came. Tanks and infantry moving wherever they wanted, our artillery firing blind. I heard my own voice before I'd fully decided. I'll go, I said. Red turned his head sharply toward me. You're out of your damn mind, Turner, he hissed. Maybe, I said, but I can see that knoll well enough from here. I know the ground between, and I'm not much good on the radio. We'll need Eddie for that. Davis's mouth tightened, like he was trying not to show relief. You're sure? He asked. Yeah, I said, I'm sure. I'm going too, Red said abruptly. No, you're not, Davis said at once. One of you is enough to risk, the other one stays here and shoots at anything that gets close to him. Red glared. You're not sending him out there alone, he said. He won't be alone, Davis said. He'll have every rifle in this company covering him, and he'll have the big guns behind him. That's more company than most men get. Red looked like he wanted to argue more but knew he'd lose. He reached out instead and grabbed my sleeve. You come back, Red said, his voice rough. You hear me, Turner, you come back. I'm not tellin' your ma I let you go get yourself killed on some stupid hill. I'll do my best, I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. I told you I owe you a trip to Pennsylvania. Eddie scooted closer, offering the radio handset. You know the basics, right? He said. You call in with our call sign Fox 2 and tell him this is Fox 2 observation. Grid coordinates, type of target, fire for effect or adjust fire. Don't get fancy. And for God's sake, remember to say danger close if you're calling it within 100 yards of our own line. Danger close, I repeated, got it. He shoved something else into my hand, a pair of binoculars, old but solid. Better than your eyeballs, Eddie said, treat 'em nice. I slung the radio's strap over my shoulder, feeling its weight dig into my jacket. The handset cable coiled like a strange vine. Davis looked at his watch. It's 05:10, he said. We expect them to start again any minute. You go now, you've got a chance to get dug in before they realize you're up there. Once you're in place, stay low and stay alive. Easy for you to say, I muttered. He almost smiled. Get moving, Turner, Davis said. We're counting on you. I crawled out of the foxhole, feeling every eye on my back. The snow crunched softly under my knees and elbows. The air felt colder away from the slight shelter of the hole. The 50 yards to the knoll might as well have been a mile. I stayed low, using every bit of cover I could find: fallen branches, small dips in the ground, the shadow of a shell crater. Halfway there, I paused behind a log, lying flat, listening. The woods were holding their breath. I could hear my own heart in my ears, a fast, heavy thump. I could hear the faint hiss of the radio set on my back. I could hear the creak of leather as I shifted my grip on my rifle. No shots, not yet. I slithered the last few yards, then threw myself the final distance, landing hard on the top of the knoll. The ground was about as generous as a stone table. I whipped out my entrenching tool and started hacking at it, throwing dirt and snow forward to make a low berm. My fingers were numb, but they moved anyway. By 05:15, I had something that was more like a shallow grave than a foxhole, but it was better than nothing. I lay behind it, chest heaving, and brought the binoculars up. From here, the view was wider and worse. I could see the ground we'd been firing over: broken trees, shell craters, bodies, some in gray, some in khaki. I could also see further back now into the treeline where the tanks and reserves were. I saw movement. Fox 2 observation to fire control, I said into the handset, my voice low but steady. Do you read? Static hissed, then a clipped voice came back. Fire control reading you, Fox 2 obs, go ahead. This is Turner on the knoll in front of Easy Company line, I said. Grid 2-4 Bravo. I checked the little map Davis had shoved into my pocket. I have enemy armor and infantry staging in the treeline north-northeast of my position. Estimate 3 tanks, company-size infantry. Request harassing fire on treeline, Grid 2-4 Bravo, adjust fire. Copy, Fox 2 obs, the voice said. Stand by for splash, 1 round, adjust, over. I watched the treeline through the binoculars, my breath fogging the lenses. I wiped them quickly with my sleeve. A few seconds later, a distant thump from behind us, one of our own guns firing. Then 40 yards short of the treeline, a shell landed, throwing up snow and dirt. Over by 50, add 50, I said into the handset. Then fire for effect on that line. Copy, Fox 2 obs, over by 50, add 50, fire for effect, danger close. I looked back toward our own line. The tree line was maybe 70 yards beyond it from where I lay. Negative, danger close on this run, I said, plenty of room. Roger, stand by. The next salvo came in tight along the edge of the trees. Shells burst among the trunks, sending splinters flying. I saw at least one tank reverse, backing up out of the worst of it. Infantry scattered, some hugging the ground, some running deeper into cover. Good hits, I said, keep it up. Roger, Fox 2 obs, walking fire left to right, the voice said. I adjusted my position slightly, feeling very exposed up there. I could feel eyes on me, whether real or imagined. At 05:20, the Germans answered. The tanks started forward again, more decisively this time, spreading out a little. Their engines sounded angrier, if that was possible. Behind them, infantry poured forward in waves, thicker than before. They'd taken their hits from the artillery, but they were still coming. And this time, they knew there was somebody on the knoll. I saw a cluster of shapes break off and move not toward our line, but toward me, half a dozen men maybe, fanning out. Fox 2 obs to Easy Company, I said into the radio. They've spotted me, enemy squad moving on my position, bearing 30 from my foxhole, about 50 yards. I heard O'Malley's voice faintly through the trees, yelling orders. Turner, get your head down, we've got you covered. The first bullets came a second later, cutting the snow on the crest of the knoll, snapping past my ears with that frightening, angry bee sound. I hugged the dirt, pressing into my shallow scrape. Fire control, Fox 2 OBS, I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. Armor and infantry advancing. Request new fire mission, Grid 2-4 Bravo, target advancing line approximately 100 yards in front of my position. Danger close, repeat, danger close. Copy, Fox 2 OBS, the voice said. Danger close accepted, stand by, splash in 30 seconds. 30 seconds feels very long when men are shooting at you. I fired my rifle twice at the men coming toward me, not aiming so much as trying to make them think twice. One of them went down, the others spread out more, weaving between chunks of broken ground. Our own guys on the line opened up too, shooting at anything moving toward the knoll. Bullets zipped past me in both directions. 20 seconds, I muttered to myself, come on, come on. One German soldier made a rush up the slope, yelling something I couldn't make out. I saw his face clearly for a moment, young, cheeks raw from the cold, eyes wide. I shot him, he fell, slid back a little, left a dark smear in the snow. 10 seconds, I breathed. The shells landed like sledgehammers. The first set hit just beyond the crest of the knoll in the low ground between me and the enemy. The world went white, then brown, then black as earth and snow and rock erupted. The concussion slammed into my chest. I tasted blood in my mouth where I'd bitten my tongue. Adjust, I tried to shout, but I wasn't sure if the words came out clearly. The second barrage walked a little further out into the German line. I saw a tank stagger under a near hit, then another blast caught its rear, smoking it. The men coming for me disappeared into the chaos. One crawled away, dragging a leg that didn't seem to work anymore. Others didn't move at all. I sucked in air that smelled of explosives and frozen dirt. Fox 2 OBS confirm, the voice crackled in my ear. Good hits, I managed. Maintain for 30 seconds then cease, over. Roger, 30 seconds then cease. Those 30 seconds folded time again. Each impact felt like a separate world being born and ending. I clung to the ground and to the thought that every one of those shells was one more reason the Germans weren't going to walk into Bastogne. When the barrage stopped, the sudden quiet made my head ring all the louder. The German assault had been blunted but not broken. Some of them were still advancing, more cautiously now, using the craters my artillery had made for their own cover. Fox 2 OBS to easy, I said. They're still coming, just fewer of them. Tanks are pulled back a bit, infantry close. I can't call any more danger close without hitting our own. It's on rifles and bazookas now. Copy that, Turner, O'Malley's voice came faintly tight. You've done enough up there, get your ass back here. I almost laughed. Negative, I said. I've got a good view, I can help call out flanking moves, I'll stay for now. Damn fool, O'Malley muttered, but he didn't argue. So I stayed. From 05:30 to 06:00, the world condensed into a series of small, intense moments. I saw a German squad trying to slip around our right using a shallow draw. I called it in. Our machine gun on that side shifted, caught them in the open, their bodies tumbling. I saw a medical team, our own, rushing a wounded man back behind the line, bullets kicking up dirt around their boots. I wanted to yell at them to get down and also wanted to stand up and shield them with my own body, though I knew that was nonsense. I saw one of our bazooka teams, different from Jenkins' guys, a kid from Iowa whose name I barely knew, crawl to a new firing spot and take out another tank that had been edging forward. The tank's turret flew partially off in a grotesque leap. Smoke followed. I saw a German officer stand up to rally his men, waving them on. Someone from our line, maybe red, maybe not, put a bullet through his chest. He folded like a cut wire. Every few minutes, I'd put the handset to my mouth and breathe out another set of words. Fox 2 OBS, infantry massing near burned-out tank grid. Single tank trying flank left. Suggest airburst over their trench line at Each time distant guns answered. I wasn't just an American up there. I was a small, tired piece of a much bigger machine, connecting the eyes at the front to the fists in the rear. At 05:45, my hands shook, not from cold, though I was freezing, but from exhaustion and the enormity of it all. Fox 2 obs, the voice on the line said at one point, unusually soft. This is fire control. You're doing good work out there, son. Keep your head down. Trying, I said. The sky grew lighter with every breath. The trees went from black to gray to detailed branches and needles and patches of frost. I risked a glance back toward our own lines. I saw our foxholes, subtle depressions in the ground, smoking slightly where grenades had gone off. I saw men, boys, really popping up to fire, ducking down again like some grim game of whack-a-mole. And I saw, in the middle of our sector on a broken fence post, somebody had tied a small American flag. It fluttered in the cold wind, its colors desaturated by the early light but unmistakable. Something tightened in my chest. I thought of my mother standing at the sink listening to the radio. I thought of my father pretending not to worry. I thought of my younger sister sitting cross-legged on the floor tracing the front lines on a newspaper map with her finger. I thought of all the kids in Scranton, in Birmingham, in Brooklyn, in places with names I'd never heard, sleeping in warm beds, dreaming of presents and candy, not hearing the sounds I was hearing. Fear was there, make no mistake. It sat in my gut like a lump of ice. Any second a bullet could find me, a shell could land a little too close, a tank might get lucky. But something else sat there too, burning hotter. A kind of quiet, stubborn anger that these men out there in gray thought they could shove their way through our line and keep this war going, keep killing people an ocean away from where it had started. Not here, I murmured under my breath, not into the radio, just to myself. You don't get past here. At 05:55, the German attack finally began to crack. Their infantry, hammered by artillery and rifles and their own failed momentum, started to pull back in more visible numbers. A couple of tanks reversed, their turrets still facing us, grouchy beasts backing away from a fire they didn't want to cross. A few diehards still pushed forward, but now they came in ones and twos, not in lines. Those ones and twos died the way such men usually do, quickly, bravely, and to little purpose. I gave fire control one last correction on a stubborn machine gun nest that had been giving us trouble, watched it vanish under a well-placed shell, and then lowered the handset, the radio suddenly very heavy. Fox 2 obs status, the voice asked. I raised the handset again, throat tight. Enemy assault breaking up, I said. Armor withdrawing to treeline, scattered infantry still in front of our line but farther out now. Recommend shifting support to deeper targets. We can handle the rest with small arms. Copy, Fox 2 obs, fire control said. There was a pause. You able to exfiltrate safely? I looked at the 50 yards between me and our line. It didn't look much better in daylight than it had in the dark, but there were fewer bullets crossing it now. I'll find out, I said. I stood up, legs stiff, and waved my arm toward our foxholes. A couple of helmets bobbed in acknowledgement. Then I started back. This time I didn't crawl, not entirely. I moved in a half-crouch fast, trusting that most of the eyes out there were looking the other way now, toward their own lines, toward their own wounded. A couple of shots snapped nearby, but nothing close enough to make me dive. Halfway back, I stumbled in a small crater, went down on one knee, hissed as my already bruised ribs protested. I got up and kept going. At 06:00, I slid into our foxhole headfirst and landed in a tangle of limbs and gear. Red grabbed me and hauled me the rest of the way in. You stupid son of a... He stopped, his hands on my shoulders, shaking me once. His eyes were bright in the gray light. You made it. Did you doubt me? I said, breathless. All the time, he said, every second. O'Malley dropped in a moment later, clapping my helmet so hard my teeth clicked. Nice work, Turner, he said. You and those big guns did us a good turn, that knoll still in one piece. More or less, I said. He nodded. Good, he said, get some water, Doc'll take a look at you. We've probably got an hour before they decide whether they liked the taste of that enough to come back for seconds. Think they will, I asked. I don't know, he said honestly, but if they do, we'll be here, same place, same bad attitudes. He climbed back out, checking other positions, his boots crunching in the snow. Doc Hanley appeared again, his face lined with exhaustion and smeared with other people's blood. Any new holes, he asked. I think I'm all original issue, I said, just bruises. He checked my arms quickly anyway, poked a spot on my side that made me wince. You'll live, he said, a little more uglier, but that's between you and your mirror. Thanks, Doc, I said. He moved on. Eddie popped his head over the edge of the foxhole, the radio still slung on his back. Fire control says nice shooting, Tex, Eddie said. I'm from Pennsylvania, I said. Whatever, Eddie said, they liked you. Red handed me a canteen. Drink, he said, before the next fun starts. I took a long pull. The water was barely above freezing, but it tasted like life. For a moment, the battle receded a little, not gone, never gone, but pushed back to the edge of hearing. I could hear birds faintly somewhere deeper in the woods, confused by the sudden silence. I could hear the distant rumble of tanks moving away. I could hear someone down the line sobbing quietly, the sound raw. 2 hours, Red said softly, looking at my watch. From when O'Malley came by to now, feels like 2 days. Feels like 2 lives, I said. He glanced at me. Yeah, he asked, what's the difference? The one before 4 a.m., I said slowly, where I thought about home like it was some story I'd go back to someday. And the one after 6, where I know that whether I get back there at all depended on what we did right here. Red was quiet for a second. You think anyone back home will ever know about that stupid little hill you were on? He asked. Or that stump someone tied that flag to, or Jenkins blowing that tank? I pictured a newspaper headline, Allied troops hold Bastogne, a map with arrows, a newsreel clip of General Patton talking about relief columns. No, I said, not by name, not most of it anyway. So why does it matter so much? Red asked, not angry, just curious. Why did you crawl up there? Why did Jenkins drag his bazooka bleeding through the snow? Why'd Doc run toward the yelling? I thought about it. Because if we don't, I said, those tanks roll through and that infantry pushes past and Bastogne falls. And then some other town falls, and some other. And maybe some kid in Scranton or Birmingham or Brooklyn has to hear gunfire on his street instead of on a radio. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded, sweat-softened rectangle of cloth, small, worn at the edges. My mother had pressed it into my hand at the train station months before. Just a little piece of home, she'd said. I unfolded it. It was a tiny American flag, no bigger than my hand. I held it between my fingers for a second, then pressed it to my chest and put it back in my pocket. Patriotism, I said, isn't just about the flag on the stump or the one in my pocket. It's about the idea that those things stand for, that people should get to live their lives without somebody else's boots on their neck, that my kid brother should worry about baseball tryouts and school dances, not about where to find cover when the shells start. Red nodded slowly. Never heard you talk so pretty, Turner, he said. Don't get used to it, I said, it's the lack of sleep. We sat there side by side in the battered foxhole, the sky lightening above the shattered trees, the smell of cordite and cold mingling in our noses. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. There would be more attacks, more freezing nights, more artillery, more men not coming back. There would be other ridges, other knolls, other stupid pieces of ground that suddenly became the whole world for the men on them. But those 2 hours from 04:00 to 06:00 on a December morning outside Bastogne were a kind of distillation for me. In those hours, I learned that courage doesn't feel like the movies. It feels like being scared out of your mind and moving anyway because the alternative is worse. I learned that patriotism isn't flags and speeches, but a guy from Alabama, a kid from Brooklyn, a medic from Ohio, and a farmer's son from Pennsylvania all freezing in the same foxhole, holding a line together so that people they will never meet can live in peace. I learned that time can stretch and snap, that minutes can hold lifetimes. Years later, when people would ask about the war, I'd sometimes tell them about Bastogne in general terms, about how we were surrounded, about how it was cold, about how we held. But I never quite told them about that knoll, about the way my hands shook around the radio, about the way the earth jumped under me when our own shells hit close. That part was mine and Red's and O'Malley's and Jenkins and Doc, and all the others whose names never made it into any history book. Because history books talk about divisions and corps and operations. But history is really made in foxholes and on little knolls and in 2-hour slices of terror and stubbornness when some ordinary kid looks at an impossible situation and says, "Not here, not today." And means it.